Georgia opening up football for the 2021 season. Dean Legge, Matt DeBerry, Ryan Curley here. We're going to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs we just talked with four players and Kirby Smart. And just initial thoughts, Matt, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it seemed like he was ready for the team to get back out there, build some chemistry, build some leadership, build some toughness. He was not all that, excited to talk about other stuff, in the college football landscape. There's so much going on between the NIL, recruiting, expanded playoffs, Texas, Oklahoma. He was focused on his team and just getting better. He was excited to get out there and start practice. They know the goals ahead of them. They know expectations are high. And at this point, it's just going out there and developing. He said that a lot. He wants to get out and develop all this talent that they've acquired through recruiting, through the transfer portal. And he touched on a good bit of that. And, of course, that's all over on Dog Post. But it looked like it was business as usual. He was, talking like he's ready to get things going.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, and all of the players too. I mean, it was business as usual, and they weren't focused on Clemson. When they were asked about Clemson, they weren't saying that that's something they've been focused on the entire offseason. When it gets closer to that game, they'll start prepping every day. But they're focused on themselves and developing their players and making sure that they're ready for the season and that they're healthy and that they're prepared with the playbook. And then obviously the emphasis on getting the team vaccinated. They're over 90% now. I know that's been a big goal with them, and he's given props to their training staff and their medical staff, and that seems to have been a big focus this summer.
I do want to talk just for a second here, and y'all can chime in. Well, first of all, as it relates to the vaccinations, I'm a little bit in the dark, but I don't know if there's been an official statement from the league, but over a certain percentage, guys aren't going to be tested. And that would be beneficial twofold. Number one, you're not getting tested. And I mean, I wouldn't want to be tested, particularly with the very deep test close to your brain. And then number two, if you're not going to get tested, that means you're not going to be ruled out of playing a game. I know that's an important thing for a team like Georgia. But secondly, and Matt, why don't you jump in on this one real quick? You started talking about Kirby was asked about scoring, essentially, and the evolution of his offenses at Georgia in the time that he's been there. There's not been that much evolution, but this season I think people hope that there will be a big jump. And he talked about, he said, this is a direct quote, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I think Alabama had 4 first-rounders. I know that they had them in separate years, but I don't know if we've had 4. I don't know if having 4 first-rounders at wide receivers, which you're asking about. I know LSU had 2 first-rounders on the team that we played. Maybe it wasn't 2. Maybe it was just 1 that I'm blah, 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 blah. The point is, he's saying, hey, we're better than we were. I'm just not sure if we've got a bunch of first-round players. He said, I think that we've been able to close the gap in that if the standard was Alabama or LSU in terms of offenses, we've closed the gap, but I don't know if we have 4 first-rounders. They probably don't have 4 first-rounders.
No, I think they definitely have one. A healthy George Pickens is a first-round talent. A healthy Eric Gilbert is a first-round talent as well. But, Kirby's been criticized, the last couple of years of not adapting to this new age of pass-happy, offensive scheme where you see Alabama. What they did last year was incredible if you go back and look. And, of course, that 2019 LSU team was one of the best offenses around. And Georgia's still going to be a team that runs the football. He talked about, how many backs they have that are reliable. So they're still going to run the football. But he made it clear that he wants guys on the outside who can make plays, who can score at will, whether it's down the field or in the screen game. They need playmakers, and they're trying to add those guys up. And he basically said it's critical now to have guys who can score on any particular play. Now, they have a lot of talent, a lot of young talent. And, again, if that was a full, healthy wide receiver room, if they had a healthy George Pickens and a healthy Don Blaylock, you're looking at one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. And it still may be that way with Eric Gilbert. But it's clear they do want to run the football, but they have to be as explosive as they were towards the end of last year when JT Daniels took the reins. They want to keep that up, and you have to score quickly in this league, and that's what they're going to try to do this year.
You have to have the ability to score quick, Ryan. What do you think about that?
I mean, they may not have more than 2 first-rounders, like for sure first-rounders in that offensive weapon group, but the abundance of talent is something that they have to be happy about, especially with, you have 4 or 5 pretty reliable, running backs that can be stars on a lot of other teams, and a bunch of 4 and 5 star receivers. I don't know if it really matters if they're a first, necessarily like a bona fide first round talent. They have the abundance of stars, and then they have the composed quarterback that's got to be able to just get it out to his weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, I I got the feeling, although Kirby didn't say it today, that Blaylock will be out there by the time they play Clemson. That would be my suspicion. I fully expect Kieras to be out there. He was saying that Marcus Rosemey was in there, good to go. You still have Burton. Obviously, you have a slew of tight ends. No one talked about Mitchell, although he had an excellent spring game. Although spring games are where it seems like dreams are made, but not necessarily fulfilled in the fall. So we'll have to see what happens with him. I think this is as good a receiver group as Georgia's had in a while. I think it was Gene Chizik the other day that was talking about the receivers at Georgia being the best group in the conference. Someone else, I think it was Roman Harper, was saying that he feels like the running backs are the best in the conference. I don't think they have the best quarterback, but he's probably number 2 or 3. And this offense should explode. The question is, what happens if they don't, Matt? I mean, they struggled for a bit against Mississippi State, although they did score some deep balls, 400 yards passing. They didn't explode against Cincinnati, although it was there. It was there against Alabama last year, even though Stetson was playing quarterback and not JT Daniels. The plays, I think, are going to be there to be made.
I think you're right. There were a lot of times last year where guys were running wide open, and the ability to have big plays were there, just weren't executed. And I think in year 2 of Monk and year 2 of JT Daniels, and with these young receivers, we should see a little bit more chemistry, especially down the field. We haven't even mentioned Arian Smith. I mean, if we talk about the receivers, there's a lot of guys with first round speed. That's only one part of obviously being a receiver, but it's a big one. So they have the speed, they have the ability to get guys open downfield, because Todd Monken has been doing this for a while. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to create and design plays to where these guys are open on their own. And the plays are going to be there to be made. And I think with the more chemistry they build, and however they develop in this fall camp, will show how good this unit can really be through the air.
Ryan, I guess it's kind of a general takeaway question, but what did you get out of today? These first press conferences can always be a little bit dry and dull. This one was that way too. What did you take out of today? Was it the Alabama LSU receiver discussion, or was it something else?
I just think that everyone seems really locked in. Something I definitely took away, because multiple players were asked about it, was those skull sessions that they do. They're really trying to emphasize just the team bonding and communicating together. And I mean, they just seem really locked in. They seem like they really want it. And it's important that they had this full spring and summer together when they didn't have it last year. People like to point to, the way that Joe Burrow had that second year with LSU, the way that Kyle Trask's second year in command at Florida. People like to point and say, well, JT Daniels might have that. And there's a lot of guys that can really step up, because they have more cohesion this time. And it seems like they're really emphasizing just getting to know each other and making sure that them as a team is their priority.
Matt, if JT Daniels has a year like Kyle Trask or Joe Burrow, they're going to win the national championship.
Yeah, as long as they're just, Spencer Rattler maybe doesn't have that same type of year. But he could be up for the Heisman Trophy conversation, especially if they beat Clemson. Dude puts up 350 yards, 3 touchdowns. Boom, his name's going to be there from the start. And if they take care of business the rest of the way, he's going to be there the whole time. Now, I don't know if the numbers will be Kyle Trask-ish, because they are going to run the football a lot, especially in the second half. Now, they still want to play that type of bully football when they can. But they also want to score quickly and, in a big fashion, and have more explosiveness on offense. But there's a lot of potential for this, team to be really good. And going back to Ryan's point with the skull sessions, is it just take something like that, getting to know the guy you're playing beside on a personal level, to take a very good team and turn them into a championship team? Is that, I think this team really thinks that, hey, you know what, maybe if we have some more team chemistry and we get to know each other and play for each other a little more, that might be that missing ingredient that maybe they didn't have in the past couple of years. But we'll see. But that's definitely something that they've emphasized more than once to us.
Is that a question? I mean,
maybe just an overall thought.
I'll take that as a question. I'm thinking back to my days of playing in college, and you're with guys that you don't really know, and even a couple years into it, it can be that way because you have new players every single year. Part of me thinks that's a little bit Pollyanna, a little Disney dog, for lack of a better term. But part of me also thinks if you know someone, you can say to them in a way that's more real, hey, listen, what you're doing is not working, and it's got to be better than this right now. I don't. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I'm always struck with these things, and someone of the two of y'all can jump in. Ryan's only been doing this for a little amount of time. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm always struck with how hard everyone works in the summer, and we hear about it. I'm always talking about how great the new guys are, and we hear that every summer. I don't know what the guys were supposed to say because I'm certain they worked really hard. I don't think there's any question about that. But you know, if you could play back to 2002, 2012, 2017 summer, first day from fall camps, I guarantee you they sound an awful lot like 2016, 11, 10, and 6 ones. The difference is, unlike those years that I just mentioned, and coming into 21 and going into 12 and 17 and 7 and 2, there were a lot more known known things about the team. You didn't have that in 6-10 and 16. We know who's going to start at quarterback. We knew that in 17, but things changed, and it turned out it didn't necessarily matter who the quarterback was, and people can just relax. You know generally what I'm saying there. We didn't have a first clue who was going to start last year. We didn't know at all what was really going to happen in 6. And we didn't really know totally what was going to happen in 16. We thought it would be Jacob Eason. There's just so many known knowns here. I think what you come into a season worrying about, if you want to say that, is how do you prepare your team for the unknowns? How do you prepare your team for when X gets hurt, or you suffer a loss that you just shouldn't have lost the game? I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen in a season. It's never simple and easy. And I am always struck with how everyone is so positive coming out of the first day. And the truth is, until you get hit right in the face mask, you don't really know what you're getting into. And I'm going to go to Matt right now on what I just said.
Yeah, you got to go out and the pads have to pop. That's when it's really here. Guys are hitting each other, and that's the biggest way you build the team is you go out and you practice with these guys, and you learn and develop with the guys around you. Going back to the skull sessions, I don't know if they're in small groups. I don't know if they're position groups because I feel like those guys should already kind of know each other by now, especially the veterans. So I don't know if it's offensive guys meeting defensive guys and building relationships with them, because more often than not, they're not really going against each other until towards the end of practice. They're on their separate fields or whatever. So, but it is something that maybe makes this team a little different. But we've gone into seasons before with these crazy high expectations. Going into 2004, they were one of the best teams in the country. They were number one going into the 2008 season. So this program in general knows this type of feeling. Going into the fall, things are clicking, just a lot going on, and this year is no different. So they need to come out and be ready. They're not starting with UAB or Arkansas State. They're starting with Clemson, and you can kind of see that in Kirby's eyes and even in the kids' eyes today. They're ready for ball. They're ready for camp, and they're ready to get better and have the season be here.
And Ryan, they've opened up with big games before. They played Clemson before in at the start of seasons in 02, 3, 13, and 14. They started with Oklahoma State. Boise. They've opened up with big game. The North Carolina game was a relatively big game, I have to say. Um, this is the biggest challenge coming into a season that I can recall in the last, maybe since 1982, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, they, as much as they say that they're not focused on that, that's got to be in the back of some of these young guys' minds. I mean, they're opening up at a neutral site against Clemson, who's been an awesome program the last few years. So that's definitely something that they're probably thinking about, no matter how much they tell us that they're not focused on that quite yet. I mean, these are 19, 20, 21 year olds. They definitely got to be thinking about that. They have social media, everything. Everyone's talking about that. We've talked about that in almost every video so far. Somehow the Clemson game pops up, because there's a lot of time to talk about it. Something that stuck with me this summer, just between media days and then today, is I'm getting a really big sense of unselfishness among them, and I think that's something that's going to bode well for them. I mean, they know how many stars they have on offense. They know that they have a talented defense, and like JT Daniels said, it doesn't matter if I have to. I don't remember his exact quote from a few weeks ago. It doesn't matter if he has to throw 10 passes, a bunch of dump downs, hand the ball off. It's just they just want to win, and I think that they definitely, however they are uniting, they feel very united right now and have a sense of unselfishness that they just win however they can, and they have the weapons to do so to win in multiple ways.
It's all good. It all sounds good, and I hate to be the old guy and the skeptical guy, but it's all good until you really get tested. And the truth is, we won't know until that time comes. And you know, I do think that JT Daniels has become a leader. I mean, those people aren't just saying that, Matt. They mean that. I mean, I hear that from behind the scenes too. That he's definitely different than he was. I do think he came in thinking that this would be his thing, no question, no problem, and probably right now maybe he'd be off to the NFL. That's not what happened, and he had to go through the learning experience of, hey, this didn't go my way. Hey, this wasn't easy. And he was dealing with an injury. I do think that there was a lot that JT. I think I think the through line really does connect, if that's the word or the description. From JT's growth to where they're at now, because last year was a mess. I mean, it was, y'all. I mean, this time a year ago, I didn't know if we'd have a season. It looked like we probably would, but we didn't know if there would be a playoff, if the SEC would just go out of the loan. There was a lot of confusion. We didn't know anything about JT. There was a lot of, I don't know. There was a lot of that last year. Why wasn't he beating out Jamie Newman or this, that, and the other? Now there's a lot of certainty here. And I think there's a lot of certainty at Clemson too, don't get me wrong. But Georgia, I mean, we covered Georgia, and I know Clemson and Carolina really well. I do. But as it relates to this situation, there's just more certainty at Georgia, Matt. That doesn't mean that it's going to translate to wins, but there's more certainty coming into the season. And you didn't in 19, they didn't have this sort of offense that they have coming into 21.
Yeah, I think you're right. Clemson, I just don't know if they're as deep at linebacker and in the secondary as Georgia is right now. Their defensive line is great. They are going to give Georgia's offensive line some trouble. And I think Clemson's going to be able to throw the ball around a good bit. I don't think they're going to be able to have a lot of success on the ground at all, but I think they're going to sling it around and have some big plays. But Georgia's going to have to, strike back and just come back, every time something like that happens, and again score quickly. But it's going to be a tough one. I think these are two evenly matched teams, and like Ryan said earlier, these guys have had this circled for a while. A lot of these kids on Georgia's roster chose Georgia over Clemson. A lot of Clemson kids chose the Tigers over the Bulldogs. So a lot of these guys know each other and played together in high school. So it is, it feels like that old Georgia-Clemson rivalry again, too, a little bit. And just ready for it to be here. I know Kirby and his squad are.
I'm certain that you were trying to trigger me with calling that a rivalry. You know how I am about that.
On the video game, they still have that. I know you're big on that, but it really was a genuine one in the early 80s, right?
I mean, that. No, I mean, it's I think my thing is about this, and is that every game can't be a rivalry. This is unquestionably a big game, but is Clemson NC State's not a rivalry. They play every year, so it's not just about Georgia. I mean, we've got to kind of hone in what is a rivalry and not. And I know for television, it's easy. It's like an easy thing. We're just going to say it's a rivalry. It was a big game for a long time, and then for the last 30 years, they played 4 times. So it's not what it used to be at all. I said 4 times. They played 6 times. So in that time, Georgia's played Boise 3 times or 2 times. I mean, they played Oklahoma State twice. They played,
Arizona State, Colorado.
Arizona. I mean, they moved around a little bit. It's, not like they played Florida State more than they played Clemson, but it's a big game, and it will set the tone for the season for both these teams. The winner of this game, particularly if it's Clemson, it's going to be hard for them to not get into the playoff. I mean, for Clemson, I think they just walk in if they win the game. For Georgia, I think they still probably have to win the SEC championship, but it sets the tone for a while. You still have to deal with Auburn. You still have to deal with Arkansas and the Gators. But it's a tone-setting game, Ryan.
I mean, like you said, like the last few years, this isn't UAB that they're starting the season off with. We're going to know what they're made of week 1 after the first game, more so than in other years. And they don't necessarily have to go undefeated to make the playoff. We've seen that that's not necessarily what needs to be done. But, I mean, it's a tone setter. You want to win this game, and then they can plow through, a lot of the rest of their schedule before a probable matchup with Alabama in the SEC championship. We're just assuming. But, I mean, you want to come out there and get that done. That makes the rest of the season a little bit less stressful. But there's just so much hype surrounding it.
It's not a terminal game, though. The first game of the season can't be a terminal game, but Jacksonville can be. And, you want to talk about the biggest game of the season, it's down there. I'm sorry to be that way, but that's just what it is. And none of these games in fall camp, if you're trying to do things and achieve something that you've not achieved in decades, then fall camp has to be as ruthless as it needs to be to get you ready. And honestly, the result of the Clemson game, although you'd rather win, that can't be defining either. You can't define your season, Matt, at the first game of the season. I mean, Georgia better win, but you don't define your season by the first game. I mean, Georgia's lost in October and played for a national championship, basically. Georgia's lost in November and played for a national championship. And I know you're dealing with your dog right now, but I'm coming right to you. You've got to be ready for an entire season, not just one game.
Yeah, it's kind of easier path for Clemson. Their second hardest game of the schedule is NC State. If they beat Georgia, they really can just kind of skate through the rest of the way. If they lose to Georgia, run the table, win the ACC, they're still probably in the playoffs. So Georgia needs this game more than Clemson does, I think, especially because this is year 6 of the Kirby Smart era. If you can't beat Clemson in year 6, maybe
I think there's going to be a lot of questions asked.
Absolutely.
Now, is it right to be that way? Maybe, but we'll talk about that on another video. All right, Dean Legge, Matt DeBerry, Ryan Curley. If you stuck with us this long, you need to be going over the website and checking us out. We'll see you over there, dogpost.com.